They say that on Halloween night, the air itself changes. The wind grows restless, the trees whisper as though alive, and the veil between worlds becomes thin as smoke. It is the hour when stories awaken, when the old myths step out of memory and into the dark. Some say, if you listen closely, you can hear the pounding of hooves in the sky, the voices of spectral riders sweeping across the night. Others tell of spirits moving through the streets, invisible but felt, slipping between shadows to watch the living. And always, at the edges of firelight, there were whispers of witches who knew the secrets of this night, who walked between the worlds with power both feared and respected. This was never just the invention of fright. These stories were born from pagan fire, carried across generations not to entertain, but to protect. Fear was a teacher. It reminded people to stay close to the hearth, to keep the fire burning, to honor the unseen. Halloween as we know it is a playful echo, a carnival of costumes and candy. But long before that, it was a night of reverence and dread, where every sound could be an omen and every shadow a messenger. The wild hunt was the most feared of all. On stormy nights, when clouds churned and winds howled, people believed Odin himself, or sometimes other spectral lords, led a procession of riders across the sky. These riders were not of flesh, but of spirit warriors, hunters, and lost souls bound to an endless chase. To hear their passing was to invite danger, for the hunt could sweep up the living, carrying them away into the realm of the dead. Doors were barred, offerings were left, and silence was kept, for to cross paths with the wild hunt was to risk being lost forever. But not all who roamed the night were hunters. The spirits of the dead walked freely at Samhain, drawn to the warmth of their families, to the smell of food, to the light of candles placed in their honor. The ancestors returned in love, but other souls wandered as well. Those without peace, those forgotten or restless. The Fae, too, were believed to move through the night, their mischief unchecked, their blessings or curses given at whim. This was why offerings were left at crossroads, why fires were tended through the night, why people whispered prayers as the veil thinned. It was never only about fear. It was about respect, about acknowledging the unseen and treating it with care. And then there were the witches. To the folk of old, Halloween was their night, the time when their power surged with the turning of the year. They were set to gather at crossroads, to dance around fires, to speak with spirits, and to cast charms in the hour when boundaries were weakest. Some feared them, believing they consorted with darkness, while others sought them out, trusting in their knowledge of herbs, spirits, and the hidden ways. On Halloween night, the line between witch and wise woman blurred, just as the line between worlds dissolved. Their presence was both feared and needed. For who else knew how to protect a home from wandering spirits, or how to read the signs written in smoke and shadow? All of these myths, the wild hunt, the roaming spirits, the witches of the dark, were not just tales to chill the blood. They were maps of survival. They taught people to respect the power of the night, to guard themselves against arrogance, to remember that the world is larger and stranger than what the eye can see. Fear was not meant to paralyze, but to sharpen awareness, to make the people cautious, reverent, and wise. So, when we speak of Halloween myths and legends, we are not only speaking of terror, we are speaking of memory. We are speaking of the ways our ancestors made sense of the unknown, how they clothed mystery and story, how they honored the unseen with fear and respect in equal measure. This night was never only about fright. It was about reverence. To laugh at the myths is to miss their wisdom. To listen to them is to be reminded that the unseen walks with us still. The Wild Hunt is one of the most haunting legends tied to this night, a tale that swept across northern Europe and settled deep in the bones of pagan memory. They said that when storms raged and the wind howled through the trees, it was not merely weather, it was the hunt riding a spectral procession led by Odin in the Norse lands, or by other shadowy figures in different traditions. The hunt was an army of the dead warriors and restless souls racing across the sky in endless pursuit. Their prey was unclear. Some said lost spirits, some said the living themselves, but all agreed. To cross paths with them was peril. Imagine standing in a quiet field on a stormy night, the world plunged into darkness. Suddenly, a sound rises above the wind, the pounding of hooves, the baying of hounds, the cries of riders moving too fast to be seen, yet too close to deny. Your body stiffens. The stories told you to drop to the ground, to avert your eyes, to stay silent. For to look upon the hunt was to be marked, to be swept into their ranks, never to return. Mothers warned their children, elders warned their kin, and entire villages held their breath when storms howled, believing the riders passed above. But as terrifying as it was, the wild hunt also carried wisdom. It reminded people of the power of the unseen, of forces that moved beyond human control. It taught humility, that not every mystery could be explained, not every danger faced head-on. Offerings were left at crossroads and hearths to appease the riders. Fires were tended as both protection and guidance, ensuring that loved ones might be spared. The hunt was fear, yes, but fear that demanded respect. Over time, the legend shifted. Ingsomiplaces, the leader of the hunt, was not Odin but a dark goddess, or even a cursed mortal doomed to ride forever. In the folklore of the British Isles, the hunt often included fae or spectral hounds, creatures of liminal space, neither fully of this world nor the next. Always the lesson remained: storms at night were never just storms. They were passages between realms, reminders that the sky itself could open and the dead could spill through. Halloween, in its modern form, keeps only faint echoes of the wild hunt. Ghost stories, galloping horsemen, the fear of being carried away in the night, all are fragments of the same ancient truth. That truth is this: the world is not closed. Above us, around us, within us, forces move that we cannot see but must respect. The wild hunt was a myth, yes, but it was also a warning written into the very sound of the storm. On Halloween night, when the veil is thin, those who remembered walked with reverence, for the riders might still pass by. On the night of Samhain, when the veil thins and the living world lies open to what moves in shadow, the people believed that spirits of all kinds wandered freely. The air was not empty, it was charged. The silence was not absence, it was presence. The ancestors came first in memory and reverence, for they were kin and protectors, those whose footsteps laid the path for the living. Families placed food on the table and left a place open, as though the dead might walk in from the cold and sit once more at the hearth. Bread, milk, ale, and meat were offered, and candles were lit in windows to guide them home. For one night, the line between past and present dissolved, and the family was whole again, seen and unseen, gathered in love. But not all who crossed the veil carried that warmth. Alongside the beloved dead came the restless ones, souls without peace or place. Some had died suddenly, violently, or without proper rites, and they wandered at the edges of the living world. Their presence was unsettling, their energy heavy and clinging. Folklore warned that such spirits might follow the living home, pressing close, seeking what they lacked. To guard against them, charms were hung over doors, fires were kept burning through the night, and disguises were worn so that if a wandering soul approached, it would not recognize the one it sought. The people understood that not all who came through the veil were welcome, and that reverence must always be balanced with discernment. There was another presence that walked freely on this night. To the Celtic imagination, they were neither wholly good nor wholly evil, but wild and unpredictable, moving with their own will and laws. Samhain was believed to be their time when the boundaries of their world overlapped with the human realm. They could bless or curse, gift or steal, protect or harm, depending on how they were treated. Milk, honey, and bread were left outside homes as offerings, gestures of respect meant to ensure goodwill. It was never wise to mock them or deny them, for to insult the Fae was to invite misfortune, sickness, or worse. Stories told of those who disappeared on Samhain night, drawn into the Fae world, returning days or years later, changed and marked by their passage. For the people who lived close to the land, these stories were not mere imagination but warnings shaped into memory. Every flicker of a candle flame, every sudden gust of wind, every sound in the dark could carry meaning. The presence of spirits and Fae was not questioned, it was accepted. The night of Samhain was understood as a crossing point, when the safe boundaries of the everyday world dissolved, leaving the living exposed to the mysteries of the unseen. This was not fear for the sake of fear, but wisdom. It taught caution, reverence, and respect for forces beyond human control. Over time, when these old beliefs filtered into the customs that would become Halloween, the presence of spirits and Fae was simplified into ghosts, goblins, and monsters. Their sacred meaning was stripped away, leaving only fear or amusement. The ancestor who once sat at the table became a costumed phantom. The restless spirit became a haunted tale told to frightened children. The Fae, once approached with offerings, became mischief makers in storybooks. Yet the truth beneath the play has never truly vanished. The old wisdom remains hidden in the symbols, waiting for those who remember to look deeper. Even now, many feel it. That strange heaviness in the air on autumn nights, that sense of being watched, that dream that comes too vividly to be dismissed, these are not coincidences, but echoes of the same presences the ancients honored and feared. To walk outside on Samhain is to walk with the possibility of encounter, not necessarily dramatic, but subtle, a whisper, a shadow, a feeling that the world has grown larger around you. To dismiss this is to walk blind, but to recognize it is to walk with reverence. The wisdom of the old stories is that the world is never empty. It is full, laid, alive with memory and spirit. On Samhain, those layers draw close, and for one night the living stand not alone but surrounded. Some presences comfort, so may unsettle some remind us of the wildness that lies beyond human control. All demand respect. Halloween may laugh at these ideas, but Samhain whispers a truth that still holds, that on this night the unseen walks beside us. To honor it is not fear, it is survival. To forget it is to lose a piece of the rhythm that has bound humans to the land and the spirits since the beginning. Witches have always been woven into the shadows of Halloween night, but long before their image was twisted into broomsticks, black cats, and sinister laughter, they were keepers of knowledge, women and men who walked between the worlds when the veil was thin. On Samhain, their presence was both feared and sought, for they carried wisdom of herbs, charms, and spirits, and this night, when power surged through the land, was their time of greatest strength. To the villagers huddled close to firelight, the witch was the one who understood the language of the unseen, who knew how to read the smoke, how to protect against wandering souls, and how to call upon ancestors with words that bridged silence and eternity. In the deep hours of Samhain, witches were said to gather at crossroads, liminal places where boundaries dissolved and energies intertwined. There, they performed rites that honored the dead, invoked the old gods, and cast protective circles against what moved in shadow. Some stories tell of them dancing wildly around bonfires, their bodies moving like sparks, their voices chanting in languages too old to name. Others whispered that they spoke with the spirits directly, drawing wisdom from beyond the veil, offering guidance and prophecy to those who dared to ask. These were not games. They were acts of communion, rooted in the belief that on Samhain, the unseen world was listening closely, ready to answer. But not all tales were told in reverence. For some, witches were seen as dangerous, their connection with the night misunderstood or feared. As Christianity spread, the witch became a figure of suspicion, her Samhain rites rebranded as devil's work. The sacred dance around the fire became a Sabbath of evil, the whispered charms became curses, and the knowledge of herbs became poison. Yet beneath these distortions, the truth remained unchanged. Witches held power because they understood, because they listened when the veil thinned, because they knew how to walk in two worlds at once. This fear gave rise to stories of witches flying through the night sky, their forms silhouetted against the moon, their gatherings filled with sinister laughter and chaos. In truth, such images were born of fear, exaggerations crafted to demonize, but, like all myths, even these carried fragments of truth. The witch was liminal, able to shift shape and spirit, able to travel beyond ordinary To the paralyzed, it seemed as though they flew, moving in ways that defied the boundaries of the living world. For those who lived closer to the land, however, witches were also healers. They taught which herbs to burn for protection, which roots to drink for strength, which stones to carry for grounding. On Samhain, they instructed families how to keep restless spirits away, how to honor the ancestors properly, how to survive the long winter ahead. They were both feared and respected because their wisdom was dangerous, yes, but also essential. To dismiss the witch was to walk blind into the unseen. To honor her was to walk safely with it. As centuries passed, the image of the witch became entangled with Halloween itself. Costumes turned her into a caricature and her power into entertainment. Yet, the connection to Samhain remained. Even now, the figure of the witch on Halloween carries echoes of the truth that she is guardian of thresholds, master of herbs and charms, and walker between the living and the dead. When children don pointed hats and carry broomsticks, they unknowingly echo an ancient reverence, a recognition that on this night, the witch belongs to the story because she always has. The wisdom hidden in these myths is that witches embody what Samhain itself teaches: power in darkness, guidance in shadow, reverence for the unseen. To walk with them is to learn that fear is not the enemy, but a doorway into understanding. The witch in the shadows is not merely a figure of fright, but a keeper of balance, ensuring that the living and the unseen respect one another as the wheel turns. The myths of Halloween, the thunder of the wild hunt tearing across storm-tossed skies, the spirits drifting through villages as though carried by the wind, the fees slipping between hedgerows to play their mischievous games, and the witches gathering at the edges of crossroads have endured because they are more than mere stories. They are the echoes of an older wisdom woven into narrative so that it would never be lost. They taught that the living and the unseen are not separate, that every year carries within it a moment of death and renewal, and that fear itself is not an enemy but a guide. Samhain was never meant to be a night of senseless fright. It was a night of deep reflection, of reverence, of balance. To walk into Samhain was to feel the weight of eternity pressing close. The fires kept burning, not only against the cold but against the uncertainty of the night. The people knew that within the circle of light there was safety, but beyond its glow, something moved, not always hostile, not always kind, but always real. This awareness shaped every act. The ancestors were welcomed with open hands, for they carried love, guidance, and memory. Food was set out for them, candles lit to show them the way. The restless dead were acknowledged as well, not invited but not ignored, given offerings at crossroads so that they might pass by without harm. The Fae, wild as the winds of autumn, were honored with gifts of milk and honey, appeased so that their mischief might not grow into danger. And witches, both feared and respected, were called upon to weave protections, to read the omens, and to guide families through the mysteries of the night. Every action was part of a language of respect. Nothing was random, nothing meaningless. To laugh at fear was to invite peril. To honor fear was to survive. The myths carried this lesson forward in images that linger even now. The hunt racing through the skies reminded people that life can be claimed in an instant, and that humility in the face of the unknown is wiser than arrogance. The presence of spirits reminded them that the dead are never truly gone, that memory and love outlast flesh. The fire reminded them that nature is alive and unpredictable, not a resource to be conquered, but a power to be respected. The witches reminded them that knowledge of herbs, stones, and the unseen was dangerous, not because it was false, but because it was true. Over time, the sacred night became overlaid with new meanings. The church sought to tame it, to turn ancestor offerings into prayers for souls, to replace reverence with doctrine. Later, when the old ways crossed the ocean, it transformed again into a festival of disguises, of games, of treats. The sacred was not destroyed. It was hidden. The fire became a jack-o'-lantern glowing in the window. The masks became costumes worn by children. The offerings became sweets exchanged at the door. What once was ritual became play, but within the play, the shapes of the old ways endured, like shadows beneath the surface. And still, the wisdom waits for those willing to see. Halloween's laughter is not empty. Its images, however twisted into entertainment, are still alive with memory. Every ghost decoration is a faint reminder that the dead walk close. Every witch costume is an echo of the wise ones who spoke with spirits. Every carved pumpkin is a fragment of fire that once kept the dark at bay. We can dismiss them as games, or we can look deeper and remember. The choice is ours. The truth is that Samhain was never about terror for its own sake. It was about balance. It was about walking carefully in a world that is not entirely ours, acknowledging that the unseen is as real as what we touch, and that we are not the masters of everything we encounter. The myths remind us that arrogance brings danger, but humility brings harmony. They teach us that death is not the end, but part of the cycle, and that to honor the dead is to honor life itself. They show us that fear, when paired with reverence, becomes wisdom, a lantern lighting the way through the night. So when Halloween comes, let it be more than masks and candy. Enjoy the play, but remember the prayer. Carve your pumpkins and laugh at ghost stories, but also light a candle for your ancestors. Walk the streets in costume, but know that once those masks were shields against the restless dead. Give sweets to children, but know that once those offerings fed the unseen. Beneath the play, the old truths remain, waiting to be remembered. The conclusion of all these myths is not fear, but belonging. To honor Samhain is to take our place in the eternal cycle between life and death, between past and future, between the seen and the unseen. It is to walk with humility, to live with reverence, to understand that the world is far larger and stranger than our eyes admit. The unseen walks beside us always, but on this night it draws close enough to feel, respect it, honor it, and carry its wisdom forward. This night was never only about fear. It was about respect, and in that respect lies the power to walk safely and wisely, to honor those who came before, to live in balance with forces greater than ourselves, and to remember that we, too, will one day be the voices in the dark, the spirits at the threshold, the ancestors waiting to be remembered. To forget this is to lose the thread of who we are. To remember it is to step into the cycle with courage. Blessed be. YouTube title SEO Optimized Options 1, Halloween Myths and Legends, Spirits, Witches, and the Wild Hunt 2. The Dark Origins of Halloween, Samhain Legends, Witches and Spirits 3. Spirits, Witches, and the Wild Hunt. Halloween Pagan Folklore YouTube description on Halloween night. The veil between worlds grows thin, and ancient myths awaken. They say the wild hunt thunders across the skies, spirits wander freely through the night, and witches gather at crossroads to weave their rites in the shadows. These are not just stories for children. They are echoes of Samhain, the ancient festival of death, renewal, and reverence for the unseen. In this video, you will discover the terrifying legend of the wild hunt, Odin's spectral riders chasing lost souls, the restless spirits and fae who roamed freely during Samhain, which lore tied to Halloween night, from crossroads rituals to protective magic, why fear was never meant to paralyze, but to teach reverence and respect, the hidden wisdom beneath the myths, and how these stories still guide us today. Halloween has become a night of costumes and candy, but behind it lies a far older truth, one of fear and reverence, death and renewal, wisdom and survival. To walk into this night with respect is to remember what our ancestors always knew. The unseen is real, and it must be honored. This night was never only about fear. It was about respect. Blessed be